The moon hung heavy in the sky, a luminous specter drowning the clearing in silver light, as if the night itself were holding its breath. Sage stood frozen, the scent of pine and damp earth filling her lungs, but all she could taste was the bitter tang of betrayal. Ben, her fated mate, the one the moon goddess had woven into her soul, stood before her, his fingers laced tightly with Phoebe's. The human girl's wide, innocent eyes flickered between them, oblivious to the devastation she had just become part of. "I reject you, Sage." The words didn't just cut. They unmade her. The bond between them, once a living, breathing thing, a current of warmth beneath her ribs, a whisper of his emotions, even when they were miles apart, snapped like a frayed wire, leaving behind a raw, hollow ache. But the cruelty wasn't in the rejection. It was in what came next. Ben's voice was steady, as if he were asking her to pass him a book, not shattering her world. "I need your help," he said, and Sage nearly choked on the absurdity. "Phoebe doesn't know our world. You have to guide her." A laugh clawed its way up her throat, sharp and broken. Guide her? As if Sage could stand beside the girl who had stolen her future and teach her how to wear it. The pack would see her as weak, a discarded mate playing servant to her replacement. Her chest burned with the urge to scream, to shift and tear into the night until her voice gave out. But the weight of their stares, Ben's expectant, Phoebe's hesitant, the elders pitying, locked her in place. So she did the only thing she could. She ran. The forest blurred around her, branches whipping at her arms as she pushed harder, faster, the wind stealing the tears from her cheeks. She didn't know where she was going. It didn't matter, because in that moment, Sage wasn't a wolf, wasn't a future Luna. She was just a girl, heartbroken and furious, fleeing the ruins of a love that was supposed to last forever. And she had no idea that destiny was already circling, waiting to rewrite her story in blood and moonlight. The whispers started before Sage even made it back to pack territory. She felt them like physical blows, the sidelong glances, the hushed murmurs that cut off the moment she stepped into the communal hall. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat and wood smoke, but all she could smell was their judgment. Elder Mara's gaze lingered a second too long, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Across the fire pit, a group of warriors exchanged knowing looks, their laughter dying as she passed. Rejection wasn't just a wound, it was a brand, marking her as unwanted, broken, and in a world where strength meant survival, weakness was a death sentence. Worst of all was the bond, or what was left of it. A frayed, aching thread still tied to Ben, pulsing with every beat of her traitorous heart. She could feel him, distant but there, his emotions flickering like static. Happiness, contentment, with her, the human, while Sage's soul bled out inside her. Then came the summons. Alpha Gideon's study reeked of aged leather and dominance, the weight of his stare making her skin prickle. "The pack needs stability," he said, voice rough as gravel. "A rejected mate is a liability. You have till the next moon to secure a new bond." Her stomach twisted, not just from shame, from fear, because beneath her tunic, hidden from prying eyes and sharper noses, her body was changing. The nausea she'd blamed on heartache, the fatigue she'd attributed to sleepless nights, they weren't just grief. They were symptoms. The truth lodged in her throat like a stone. She was carrying Ben's child. And if the pack discovered it before she found a mate, They'd strip her rank, exile her, or worse, take the baby and give it to them, to Ben and his precious Phoebe, to raise as their own. Sage clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms. The pain grounded her, focused her. She wouldn't let that happen, even if it meant selling her soul to the devil himself. The grand hall glittered with false cheer, every surface draped in silks and garlands of night-blooming jasmine. Crystal goblets clinked together in hollow toasts, the air thick with cloying perfumes and the musk of wolves preening for advantage. Sage pressed herself against the stone pillar at the edge of the room, the chill seeping through her dress as she watched the grotesque masquerade unfold. She recognized the desperation in every forced smile, every exaggerated laugh. Eligible wolves circled each other like sharks, their finery barely concealing the calculation beneath. A beta from the northern pack accidentally brushed against the alpha's niece. A widowed warrior lingered too close to the councilman's daughter. This wasn't romance. It was a feeding frenzy, and Sage was the wounded seal drifting at the edge of the hunt. The honeyed wine turned sour on her tongue. She set the goblet down too hard, liquid sloshing over her fingers. That's when she felt it. The shift in air pressure, the primal awareness crawling up her spine before his shadow even fell across her. You look like you'd rather be mauled by rogues than endure another minute of this. The voice was dark velvet, wrapped around steel. Noah. She didn't need to turn to know how he stood, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, the unconscious arrogance of a born alpha. When she finally met his gaze, those gold-flecked eyes burned brighter than the chandeliers above them. He smelled like winter forests and something dangerously male, his tailored suit doing nothing to disguise the predator beneath. "Let me help you." He extended his arm, the gesture courtly but his knuckles whitening with restrained tension. "We'll find you a mate worthy of you." The words should have been comforting. Instead, her wolf bristled. Because Noah wasn't known for charity, every move he made was a chess play. His sudden interest reeked of ulterior motives, especially considering the child growing inside her that could threaten his future reign. Yet when his fingers brushed her elbow, a spark traveled up her arm, foreign and terrifying. Not the bond, not yet, but something dormant, stirring awake. Sage swallowed hard. The clock was ticking, her options dwindling, so she did the unthinkable. She placed her hand on his forearm, feeling the coiled strength beneath the fabric. "Fine," she lied through a smile sweet enough to poison. "Help me." Across the room, Ben's glass slipped from his fingers. The shadow sounded like a premonition. The drums had been pounding for hours, their primal rhythm vibrating through the packed earth beneath Sage's feet. Torches cast writhing shadows across the gathered wolves, their painted faces grotesque in the flickering light. She'd been counting the minutes until she could slip away, her borrowed emerald gown suddenly strangling tight around her throat. Then the drums stopped. Noah ascended the alpha's dais in 3 effortless strides, the torchlight gilding the sharp angles of his face. The crowd's murmurs died mid-breath. When he spoke, his voice didn't rise, it commanded, rolling across the clearing like thunder before a storm. "I've waited long enough." His fingers flexed at his sides, the only betrayal of tension. The moon goddess whispers, "Tonight I claim my mate." Sage's wine goblet slipped from numb fingers. It shattered against the roots of the ancient oak, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. She barely noticed, because Noah's gaze, hot as brandished steel, had found hers across the sea of stunned faces. Her. The single syllable detonated through the gathering. Gasps rippled outward like shock waves. Someone dropped a platter of roasted meats. To her left, Elder Mara's mouth hung open like a gutted fish. But it was Ben's reaction that burned itself into Sage's retinas. His chair screeching backward, his face contorted to something feral and unrecognizable. "You can't," he choked out, but the protest died as Noah's dominance crashed down like a hammer. Sage's legs nearly buckled, not from fear, from the bond. It snapped into place with the violence of a bear trap, a white-hot wire yanking taut between her ribs and Noah's. Her vision swam with sudden, overwhelming presence. The salt of his sweat, the iron grip of his control, the terrifying warmth flooding her veins like liquefied sunlight. Noah's nostrils flared. He'd felt it too. Somewhere in the roaring silence, Phoebe whimpered. The sound should have brought satisfaction. Instead, Sage's hand flew to her abdomen in instinctive protection. Because the baby, Ben's baby, just became the heir's greatest liability. The ceremonial chamber smelled of crushed herbs and musk, the air thick with the scent of their mingled arousal. Sage's skin burned where Noah's fingers traced the claiming marks now etched into her shoulders, each touch sending electric currents through her oversensitized flesh. The oil-slick slide of their bodies moving together in the ancient rhythm should have been enough to drown thought, but her mind kept circling back to the dangerous secret growing beneath his wandering hands. Noah's teeth scraped the mating bite at her neck as his palm drifted downward, following the dip of her waist. When his fingers splayed across the slight swell of her abdomen, so subtle no one else would notice, her muscles clenched involuntarily. His entire body stilled above her. "What are you hiding?" The question vibrated against her damp skin, his voice gone dangerously soft. Sage's breath came in shallow pants, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird beneath his lips. The truth crowded her throat. 3 months along, Ben's child, a ticking time bomb that could destroy this fragile new bond before it solidified. But the words stuck behind her teeth as Noah's thumb made a slow, deliberate circle just below her navel. The candlelight caught the gold flecks in his eyes when he lifted his head to study her face. In that moment, he looked every inch the predator, his pupils blown black with desire, yet something sharper lurking beneath, calculating, assessing. She knew that look, the alpha weighing his prey. Sage arched beneath him, a desperate distraction, dragging her nails down the corded muscles of his back. "Nothing that matters tonight," she breathed against his mouth, pouring every ounce of persuasion into the kiss that followed. For a heartbeat, she thought he might push. Then Noah growled low in his throat and claimed her lips with bruising intensity, his hand shifting to grip her hips hard enough to leave fingerprints. The message was clear. This conversation wasn't over. As the pleasure built to a crescendo, Sage bit back a sob. The cruelest irony, their bodies fit together like two halves of a whole, even as her deception wedged between them like a blade. When the climax tore through her, she couldn't tell if the salt on her lips was sweat or tears. Noah's final thrust turned punishing, his teeth sinking into her shoulder as he spilled inside her with a sound that was more snarl than sigh. In the shuddering aftermath, as he gathered her against his sweat-slicked chest. Sage stared at the ceremonial paintings on the walls, wolves chasing each other in an endless circle. A fitting metaphor, she thought bitterly, because no matter how tightly he held her now, the moment he discovered her pregnancy, she'd be running for her life again. The great hall was alive with laughter and the clatter of dishes, the scent of roasted venison and spiced wine hanging heavy in the air. Sage had spent the entire evening carefully positioning herself downwind, her loose emerald gown strategically draped to conceal what her heightened senses knew was becoming harder to hide. She'd rubbed mint oil on her wrists, chewed ginger root, anything to mask the telltale hormonal shifts. Then the platter of freshly killed rabbit passed by, its coppery scent slicing through the other aromas. Her stomach lurched violently. A mistake. One tiny gasp, one instinctive hand pressed to her lips. That's all it took. Noah's head snapped up from his conversation with the elders, his nostrils flaring. She saw the exact moment his wolf caught the scent. His golden eyes flashed, the pupils thinning to predatory slits. The crystal wineglass exploded in his fist, blood and shards scattering across the linen tablecloth like rubies. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Ben's chair screamed against the stone floor as he surged to his feet, his own wolf reacting to the pheromones before his human mind processed them. "That's," his voice cracked, "that's a pregnancy scent." At the far end of the table, Phoebe, had never been her real name, pressed a delicate hand to her mouth. But Sage saw the triumph glittering in those two innocent eyes, the subtle tightening of fingers around her fork. Noah rose with terrifying control, blood dripping from his clenched fist onto the feast below. "You're carrying Ben's child." His voice was glacier calm, the kind of quiet that comes before tornadoes tear houses from the foundations. The lie perched on Sage's tongue, ready to launch. Until she met Noah's gaze, the truth came out in a whisper. "No." A collective inhale from the pack. Ben looked like he'd been gutted. Then Noah's scent changed. Not anger, but something far more dangerous. Recognition. Calculation. His blooded hand slowly unclenched as he stepped around the table, each footfall echoing in the deathly silence. "Then whose child?" he murmured, coming to stop close enough that his next words were for her alone. "Are you carrying, mate?" The answer hung between them, unspoken but understood. Because the timeline didn't lie. That night, at the spring equinox festival, when the bonfires burned highest and the wine flowed freely, when Noah had pulled her into the shadows and she let him, both of them too angry at Ben to care about consequences, the baby was his. And now the entire pack knew it. The air in the great hall turned electric, thick with the scent of ozone and wolf musk. Iris's smirk faltered as Noah's dominance crashed down like a tidal wave, sending several younger pack members to their knees. Sage barely registered the gasps around her. Her entire world had narrowed to the strange warmth pooling in her palms, a tingling sensation crawling up her arms like vines seeking sunlight. "You think you can twist the moon goddess' will?" Noah's voice was barely human, layered with the growl of his wolf. He advanced on Iris, each step making the torches flicker wildly. "You think you can steal my brother's fate?" His claws unsheathed with an audible snick. "My mate?" Iris scrambled backward, her carefully constructed mask of innocence shattering. "It was just a glamour," she shrieked, hands raised in surrender. "A simple, charmed to... The lie died in her throat as Sage's hands erupted in silver light. The glow wasn't harsh, but soft as moonbeams, yet it illuminated every corner of the hall, exposing the dark threads of magic clinging to Ben like cobwebs. Sage gasped as knowledge flooded her mind, ancestral memories rising from where they'd lain dormant in her blood. She saw now what she'd been too heartbroken to notice before, the unnatural pull between Ben and Iris, the way their bond smelled of rotting flowers rather than true mating. Ben made a wounded sound, clutching his chest as the false bond unraveled before everyone's eyes. Sage ... His voice broke. I couldn't. But Sage wasn't looking at him any more. The power coursing through her veins sang with purpose, whispering secrets only the moon goddess's chosen could hear. She turned to Noah, her glowing hands framing his face. His eyes widened as the light reflected in them, his breath hitching when she spoke with a voice that wasn't entirely her own. The threads of fate are mending. Noah's answering growl vibrated through both their bodies as he pulled her close. When his lips crashed down on hers, the pack erupted in chaos. But Sage barely heard it over the roar of blood in her ears. This kiss wasn't gentle. It was a claiming, a promise, a seal on their shared vengeance. As they broke apart, Noah's teeth gleamed in the silver light. Let's show them, he murmured against her mouth, what happens to those who play with wolves. Outside, the full moon burned white-hot in the sky, a silent witness as the true Alpha and his Luna finally took their rightful place. And as the first howl of justice rose into the night, Sage's answering cry joined it, twining with Noah's in perfect harmony. The reckoning had come. The blood moon hung low over the sacred clearing, casting the world in crimson shadows. Sage stood at the edge of the stone dais, her swollen belly round beneath the ceremonial robes, feeling the insistent kicks of their son, the future Alpha, against her ribs. The entire pack knelt before them in the blood-stained grass, their bowed heads forming a sea of submission. Noah's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers with possessive certainty. His other hand rested on the hilt of the Alpha's dagger, still wet with Iris's blood. The witch's screams had faded hours ago, but the satisfaction of justice still thrummed through Sage's veins. At the tree line, a single figure hesitated. Ben's shoulders hunched under the weight of his exile, his scent already fading from packlands. When he turned for one last look, Sage met his gaze without flinching. The mate bond that had once ached between them was gone, severed completely when Noah's teeth had torn out Iris's lined throat. Noah's lips brushed the claimant mark on her neck, his growl vibrating against her skin. "Look at them, Luna," he murmured, "all yours." And they were. Every wolf, every inch of territory, every whispered secret. The pack elders who had pitied her now watched her with wary respect. The warriors who had doubted her strength stood ready at her command. Sage tilted her face up to the bloody moon, letting its light wash over her. The power that had awoken within her that fateful night hummed in response, silver energy flickering at her fingertips. Noah's teeth grazed her mark again, this time with deliberate pressure, a fresh claim, a promise. When she turned to face him, his golden eyes burned with something far more dangerous than lust. It was devotion, ruthless and absolute. The baby kicked hard, as if in approval. Sage smiled. Somewhere in the forest, a new howl rose, young and bold, the first of their new era. Noah's answering roar shook the earth as he pulled her against him, his hand splayed protectively over their child. Around them, the pack's howls joined in, a symphony of loyalty and power, and as the blood moon watched, Sage finally understood. The moon goddess hadn't abandoned her that night of rejection. She'd been clearing the path for this, for power, for vengeance, for a love that didn't gentle the sharp edges of their souls, but made them lethal together. The wind carried Ben's fading scent away as Noah's arms tightened around her. Some beginnings looked like endings, and some rejections. They were the best thing that ever happened to you. The end, or perhaps just the beginning of their legend,